The Epstein files have lingered in the background of American politics like a shadow nobody dares to face head-on. For years, the public has heard whispers about names, powerful names, hidden within those documents. And then, in early 2025, one admission set off a firestorm. Pam Bondi, during a live appearance, casually revealed that the Epstein client list was, in her words, sitting on my desk right now to review. It was the kind of statement that stopped people mid-scroll, the type of line that instantly spread across every platform. After years of speculation and sealed records, the thought that someone finally had the files in their hands felt like the long-promised moment of truth.
I move the committee make an order amendment number 50 to H.R. 3633 offered by Representative Khanna, which would require the Attorney General to preserve and release any records related to Jeffrey Epstein. Madam Chair, on February 21st, 2025, President Trump's own Attorney General, Pam Bondi, said on Fox News, the Epstein client list was sitting on her desk, quote, right now to review, end quote. Kash Patel, Trump's FBI director, said during his confirmation hearing that he would do everything, if confirmed, to make sure the American people knew, quote, the full weight of what happened, end quote. Patel, who now leads the FBI, said on the Benny Johnson show that the FBI was hiding the Epstein client list. Donald Trump Jr., the president's own son, tweeted out, and I quote, show us all the Epstein client list right now. Why would anyone protect those scumbags? Ask yourselves this question, and then the answer becomes very apparent, end quote. And now, forgive me, but suddenly these same people are telling us there's nothing to see here. Trump is posting that we should all just move on. Well, I want to know what the hell is in these files. And I think we all want to know why Trump is suddenly changing his tune and is so desperate to sweep this under the rug. But you know what? This also gets at his credibility. This is about trust. Republicans said, trust us, vote for us, and we will release these files. And here we are, they are backtracking. They said they aren't going to cut Medicaid, and they did. They said they wouldn't add to the deficit and debt. They exploded both. They said that they stand with law enforcement. They won't even hang a plaque honoring officers for their heroism on January 6th. They talk about law and order and can't even condemn the president for pardoning the people who violently attacked the Capitol building. So please forgive me if I don't believe a word of any of it. This isn't about gotcha politics. It's about credibility, or rather the lack of credibility on the other side, because they constantly say one thing and do something else. So I urge a yes vote on my amendment, and I yield back.
Is there any further discussion on
Madam Chair, I fail to see how that amendment is germane to this rule.
And Madam Chair, we are the Rules Committee, and we routinely waive the rules of germaneness and make things in order.
This is about defense appropriations and crypto legislation.
Well, then you can vote on it.
Mr. Scott, unfortunately, it is germane. Is there any further discussion on the amendment?
Madam Chair.
Ms. Leisure-Fernandez, you recognize.
Madam Chair, the Epstein file.
The public leaned in, expecting a wave of revelations. Finally, the secrecy might end. Finally, accountability could begin. But almost as quickly as those hopes rose, something strange happened. The very people who had once pushed hardest for the file's release suddenly began to fall silent. What began as promises of full disclosure turned into cautious statements, hedged comments, and finally outright resistance. That reversal triggered one of the sharpest credibility crises in recent political memory. That it wasn't just Pam Bondi's remarks that gave the sense change was coming. Others in positions of authority had added fuel to the expectation. The then head of the FBI, Kash Patel, said during his confirmation that if he were given the role, he would do everything in his power to ensure the American people knew, in his words, the full weight of what happened. His comments reassured millions that there was a commitment to transparency at the highest levels. He even appeared later on a popular talk show insisting that the Bureau had information it was withholding, openly acknowledging that the client list was real and under lock and key. These moments built anticipation that at last, the curtain would be pulled back. But then came the silence. The voices that once shouted for release of the names shifted their tone. Suddenly, the conversation became about moving on, about focusing on other priorities, about dismissing questions with vague answers. For those watching closely, the change felt more than suspicious. It felt calculated, and that made one question echo louder than all the rest. What, exactly, was in those files that made disclosure so dangerous? The reversal didn't just raise eyebrows. It cracked the fragile trust that had been asked of the public again and again. This was not the first time promises had been made and broken. Not by a long shot. Leaders had promised not to cut Medicaid, yet the cuts came. They vowed not to add to the national debt, yet the debt soared. They declared themselves unwavering supporters of law enforcement, yet they could not bring themselves to honor the officers who defended the Capitol during the violent attack on January 6th. Each promise broken left a scar, and by the time the Epstein file controversy came to the forefront, people were already primed to expect betrayal. The pattern was impossible to ignore: strong words when convenient, silence when accountability was on the line. And the Epstein records were perhaps the most glaring test yet of that credibility. In committee hearings, frustration boiled over. One representative asked plainly, "If there is nothing to hide, then why not release the files?" The question seemed almost too obvious. After all, these were not abstract policy papers. They concerned allegations of abuse against women and children. The moral weight should have demanded daylight. Even in conservative circles, there had once been loud demands for release. Constituents across the country wanted answers. Parents wanted to know who in positions of power may have been involved. Survivors demanded recognition of what had been endured. The amendment presented in the Rules Committee should have been straightforward: require the Attorney General to preserve and release all records tied to Epstein. On paper, it was the clearest possible test of transparency. And yet, what followed revealed how far the gap between words and actions had grown. The roll call was striking. When it came time to vote on whether the amendment should pass, the split was sharp and predictable. Republicans largely voted no. Democrats largely voted yes. In the end, the amendment failed. 5 supported it. 7 opposed. Just like that, the door slammed shut again. The files would remain sealed. Some tried to justify it by saying the amendment was not germane to the rule under discussion. But when pressed, the truth slipped out. The committee routinely waives rules of germaneness whenever it suits them. This was no procedural technicality. It was a choice. A deliberate choice to keep the most sought-after files in the country locked away from public view. For many watching, that vote was not just disappointing. It was devastating. Because a simple yes could have opened the door to truth. Instead, the response was no. The reasoning offered afterward only added to the distrust. Committee leaders said, "What's appropriate will be released when it is time." To the public, that sounded like little more than political code for never. After years of hearing, wait and see. After years of being told to be patient, patience had worn out. People were tired of being strung along. Each vague assurance now felt like another brick in the wall of secrecy. And online, the theories multiplied. Who were they protecting? Which powerful names were so entangled in Epstein's network that disclosure would shake the foundations of politics and business alike? No one outside the circle knew. And yet, because of the silence, every rumor gained traction. Every whispered name felt plausible. When secrecy becomes policy, suspicion becomes truth in the public mind. Some reports have claimed that the list includes figures from both parties, from entertainment, finance, and politics. Others suggest it contains people with international ties, names that could shift alliances if revealed. None of it can be confirmed without the files. But the lack of transparency ensures speculation thrives. In this climate, every unanswered question feels like a deliberate cover-up. The refusal to release becomes, in itself, an admission of guilt in the eyes of many. And so, the files have taken on symbolic power. They are no longer just documents. They are the embodiment of secrecy, hypocrisy, and betrayal at the highest levels. They represent the gap between promises made in front of cameras and choices made behind closed doors. The credibility crisis deepens with each passing day. If leaders cannot be trusted to honor their word on something as serious as the abuse of women and children, then what can they be trusted on? If every promise dissolves the moment accountability becomes inconvenient, then how can anyone believe the next promise? This erosion of trust is not theoretical. It has real consequences. It fuels cynicism. It drives disengagement. It convinces millions that the system itself is broken beyond repair. And in the vacuum left by silence, darker voices rise. Conspiracy theories flourish. Extreme claims find fertile ground. All because transparency was denied at the exact moment it was most desperately needed. Consider the arc of the story. Pam Bondi's casual remark that the client list was on her desk created hope. Kash Patel's pledge to reveal the full weight of what happened raised expectations higher. Lawmakers once demanded the list be shown to the public. Constituents believed the pressure was finally working. And then, almost overnight, it collapsed into silence, excuses, and finally outright rejection of the one amendment that could have made disclosure unavoidable. That arc is the reason people feel betrayed. Not just because the files remain hidden, but because the people who promised daylight were the very ones who pulled the curtains shut. The lesson here is not subtle. Once credibility is broken, it is nearly impossible to repair. Each reversal becomes evidence of corruption. Each excuse becomes proof of deceit. And every delay makes the eventual release, if it ever comes, harder to believe. Even if the files are one day made public, millions will ask if they were altered, redacted, or selectively released. The damage is permanent. That is why the demand for transparency was so urgent in the first place. It was not just about exposing names. It was about protecting what little trust still remained. By choosing secrecy again, leaders may have destroyed even that. And so, the question remains. If the truth is so dangerous that it cannot be shared, what does that say about the people who hold it? If a simple vote to release was denied, what forces were strong enough to stop it? The Epstein files are not just about one man's horrific crimes. They are about power, accountability, and the willingness of those in charge to tell the public the truth. Right now, that willingness looks non-existent, which leaves the public in the dark, staring at closed doors, and asking the only question that matters. Will these files ever see daylight, or have they already been buried forever? One thing is certain. This story isn't finished. And the more people demand answers, the harder it will be for those in power to keep the doors locked. If you believe the truth should come out, let me know in the comments below. Do you think the Epstein files will ever be released, or are they hidden forever? Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive, because what's coming next will change everything we thought we knew.